Do you know who the real Americans are? The indigenous peoples of what is now the United States have a history stretching back tens of thousands of years. The term Indian came from Christopher Columbus, who mistakenly believed that he had reached the Indies when he arrived in the Americas. During the last ice age, groups of people migrated from Siberia into Alaska through Beringia, a land region that once connected Asia and North America. Over many generations, their descendants spread throughout North America and eventually into Central and South America. As these populations settled in different regions, they developed hundreds of distinct cultures, languages, and societies. Native American communities were never a single unified group. They included many different nations, each with its own traditions, political systems, and way of life. After the Ice Age, many communities became increasingly skilled at using the resources around them. Agriculture developed in different parts of the Americas, with crops such as corn, beans, and squash becoming especially important. Other communities relied heavily on hunting, fishing, and gathering. In different regions, people hunted animals such as deer and bison and made use of marine resources along the coasts. Some Native American civilizations also built impressive settlements and large earthworks. In parts of the eastern and central United States, enormous mounds were constructed for ceremonial, political, and burial purposes. Cities such as Cahokia, near present-day St. Louis, grew into major population centers and demonstrated the complexity of pre-Columbian societies. Everything began to change after 1492, when Christopher Columbus's voyage opened the way for sustained European exploration and colonization of the Americas. Spanish explorers were among the first Europeans to establish contact and settlements in areas such as Florida and the Gulf Coast. Over the following centuries, Spanish, French, British, and other European powers expanded their presence across North America. The consequences for indigenous peoples were devastating. European colonization introduced diseases such as smallpox, measles, and influenza, against which many indigenous populations had little or no previous exposure. Epidemics caused enormous population losses, although warfare, displacement, exploitation, and the destruction of traditional economies also played major roles. The encounter between the Old and New Worlds also created what historians call the Columbian Exchange. Plants, animals, people, and diseases crossed the Atlantic in both directions. One important example was the horse. Horses introduced by Europeans eventually spread across large parts of North America and became extremely important to many plains societies for transportation, hunting, and warfare. As European colonies expanded, conflicts over land became increasingly common. During the American Revolution, many indigenous nations supported the British because they feared that an American victory would lead to even greater expansion onto their territories. After independence, the new United States continued to expand westward. The federal government sometimes negotiated treaties to acquire indigenous lands, but settlers and state governments frequently violated or ignored these agreements. Some early American leaders, including George Washington and Henry Knox, promoted policies intended to assimilate Native Americans into Euro-American society. The government established programs aimed at changing indigenous lifestyles and encouraging farming and other European American practices. Tensions became even more severe during the presidency of Andrew Jackson. In 1830, Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act, which authorized the forced relocation of many indigenous nations from their ancestral lands to territories farther west. The most infamous consequence was the Trail of Tears. during which thousands of native people were forcibly removed from their homelands. Many died from disease, hunger, exposure, and exhaustion during the journeys. As American settlement continued to move westward, armed conflicts between the United States and indigenous nations occurred across the continent. These conflicts are often collectively known as the Indian Wars. Among the major conflicts were the Dakota War of 1862, the Great Sioux War, the Snake War, the Colorado War, and numerous conflicts in Texas and other Western territories. One of the final and most tragic episodes occurred at Wounded Knee in 1890, where US soldiers killed a large number of Lakota people, including women and children. Native Americans also served in the United States military. During World War I, thousands served despite not all indigenous people having US citizenship at the time. A major legal change came on June 2, 1924, when President Calvin Coolidge signed the Indian Citizenship Act. The law granted US citizenship to all Native Americans born within the territorial limits of the United States who had not already obtained citizenship through other means. However, citizenship did not immediately eliminate discrimination. In some states, Native Americans continued to face obstacles when attempting to vote or exercise their political rights. Today, Native Americans belong to hundreds of federally recognized tribes and many other indigenous communities. They continue to preserve their languages, traditions, cultures, and political sovereignty. The history of Native Americans is therefore not simply a story of the past. It is also a story of survival, cultural resilience, and the continuing struggle over tribal sovereignty, land, and self-government in the United States.